gonna start recording because I forgot one other time, so I'm gonna do that.
And I needed that one on the Pivo, but I ordered it. It's sitting somewhere
Oh, I'm
waiting for me to
sorry.
unbox it.
You know, it's so
Our
funny
sat
because
for a while too.
so many people were like, "Oh, I can't wait." I'm like this. Of course, that's the one. I was so worried about if that guy was going to join us or not, and nobody was responding to my text, and I'm trying to text and talk to people on the thing. It was just it's
Oh,
crazy.
well.
Yeah.
They have training.
Yeah, they do. They do. And it's
Yeah.
actually really easy. You don't even need much training. It's super easy. So yeah.
Well,
Hey,
you
how's
have
your
those.
how's your town sites?
I have everything into them. They haven't built my page yet, but it was funny because they're like, we need an hour for onboarding. And I took their homework and I got it all ready and I emailed it to her and she gets on, she goes, okay, I guess, that's all we need.
Yeah.
Well, they
Perfect.
did that with us too.
Yeah.
Morning,
Good.
Asha.
Probably most people aren't used to getting all that stuff ready and, I'm
Well,
like,
that's what she said. She goes, it's like pulling teeth sometimes. So
yeah.
yeah. So she's, I'm sure, very appreciative. So
Well, good. I think you'll be really happy with that. We have got a ton of compliments
Oh,
from just our newsletter.
yeah. Well,
I mean,
that's the reason I did it is because of
Mhm.
you guys.
Yeah.
yeah,
Good.
It's
it's
cold. I
it,
need to put a jacket on.
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Is it 65 there?
Well, I turned my little heater off because it was so warm. And do you guys
No.
see? Come here, baby girl.
Oh, cute.
Oh,
Brand new puppy. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, you know
And
what? Good for you. You needed a new companion.
I did. My heart was so broken, and she's so good. She lays in my office and just sleeps. I'm like,
Oh,
good.
you're a Pam dog.
Good. 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 Good.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Well, let's get started since it's a few minutes after 9. Thanks everybody for joining us on Empire Masterminds. Appreciate that you give us an hour on Wednesdays. Normally we kick this off with our success lending partner, Aaron Neubauer, does a little market update. But he unfortunately is very sick today. So he said he would not be able to make it to join us. So let's at least start with, anybody got a win from last week or something they want to celebrate? Any good news? Anyone?
crickets.
Pam, got your town sites going. That's a good thing. So good.
I wrote up a really good backup offer, so I'm just hoping the original buyers fall through. My client is he's like a big builder and stuff, so he doesn't care if the inspection will suck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
hoping it sucks really bad and it scares the people. So
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
That's kind of our win too. We had a backup, or we had a contingent offer in place for about, boy, a month and a half on somebody getting a job. And then we received a backup offer. So we were kind of like, we're good either way, but like we need resolution, and we finally got resolution. And last night, so the sellers are happy. They're moving forward to closing and life is good. So that's a lot of stress off their pocket, or off their shoulders there. So anyone else?
My win. My knee's getting better. I'm back to
Good.
normal almost.
Awesome.
So yeah.
That's very good for my perspective. So yes. Well, we wanted to just chat today. The market, as we were all visiting prior to this, it is getting busy out there. So if you're not busy, maybe you need to tune into more of these so we can get you going. But
So I want to interrupt you. There's a win in the chat from Mackenzie. She said her microphone isn't working, but I finally had an offer accepted on a client that I've been working with for 3 years.
yay. So Mackenzie does commercial real estate up in the Twin Cities area. So as you guys, if you're familiar at all with commercial, those sometimes take a lot longer to pull together than just the residential market. So nice job, kiddo. Good job.
hey,
She's
just
our
real
daughter, by
quick,
the
you
way.
guys, I have a question. That
Yep.
Christine is trying to jump on. It's Zoom with Kelly Domaille.
.com. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
Did
Yeah,
she
good.
work with you, Pam?
Yeah, she's at Realty One Group and she just moved over not too long ago and she's got a great attitude. So we're gonna start kind of being a little bit of a duel on certain things.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I need
Awesome.
somebody like that.
Awesome. Do you have, so you funnily mentioned I could come down and mess with your stuff, but do you have an assistant?
No, I'm going to need one. I'm just, it's the scary thing of paying somebody a salary and then that whole worry of, well, what if something happens and I don't do well this year, but
Right. Well, that's why you'll have to just think of it as a month at a time, right? I mean, that's all you're on the commitment for or whatever, right? Just think of it, or quarterly. Just say, I'm going to commit to having an assistant for a quarter. Let's see, you got to always hold any investment you make accountable, right? So you want to look at, okay, has it been benefiting me to have this assistant? Did I get additional business? Was my time freed up to get additional business, right? And if it's not, if it's costing you more or it's taking more of your time, then cut her loose. I hate to say that, right? But you always
you
have
should
to
do one of
check your
these on
investment.
that.
Yeah,
And
I know.
you can just start out slow. You could just fly me down for 3 days a month
Yeah.
and I'll help organize all the stuff. You don't have to pay me, just pay for my flight.
Okay, jokester, we got time here. Let's go.
I'm
Okay.
serious.
So anyway, let's get back to topic here. So let's talk about, it's getting busy. Things are heating up. I have been in a couple multiple offer situations already this year. Anybody else, show of hands, been dealing with any multiples yet? Okay. Yeah. So we know it's tough and we know the typical things, right, to make an offer strong, but what I wanted to do is just have a really good mastermind on what you guys are doing out there to make a strong offer for your buyers or to make it stand out. So I've got a nice list in case it's quiet on this call, but I want to hear from you guys. What are some things that you're doing to make that offer really stand out?
Well, I would say convincing the buyers that they probably will have to remove an inspection contingency.
Okay.
You know,
So I'm gonna just, I guess, tap into that. So let's start with Bob. How are you preparing your buyer for, hey, you're in that price point. We're going to probably be in multiple offers. I mean, because to me, this is the start of it all, right? It's not necessarily how they draft the offer. It's how are you preparing your buyer? So what's that conversation sound like, Bob?
yeah, that's a good question. So, typically, especially if they're in, I would say up here under 400, good chances they're going to be in a multiple offer situation in most cases. Um, you know, the key piece is having that initial consultation, which is usually for me at the first property I show them. You know, most of the clients, quite frankly, that I work with are people that I already know, or the referrals and past. I don't do a lot of, online or meet with people I don't really know. So they already kind of have that trust relationship established with me because I've probably helped somebody that they already know, or I've helped them in the past. But I just let them know, I said, we're going to be more than likely competing with potentially cash, potentially no contingencies, and we're probably going to go up higher in price. So the first thing I do is I try to also connect them in with their lender as well and just kind of explain the situation. Now I've had people, other fellow agents, that actually bring an inspector through the house to show them. I would like to say, being in the business for over 25 years now, I have a pretty good idea of if there's major concerns with the house that I can kind of point out during the showings. Now that might be a benefit that I have that other agents don't have who haven't been in the business as long as I have. So I think that's one of the benefits, just kind of knowing, what to look at on the furnace side, what to look at windows, what to look at foundation, that sort of thing. So just walking them through the house is kind of the piece that sets up that conversation with them. Okay. Now, there are times where I go through the process and say, you know what? I quite frankly don't know that I would buy this house, based upon all the things that are going to be wrong with it. It might be less. Especially if I know they're not the type of person that is handy and has, if they're looking at it for their home and they're professionals and they're maybe at a price, there might be a better option for them out there that's a little bit better. So it's situationally based, Kelly, more than anything, I would say, in that regard, setting that conversation up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I think for success for everybody out there, when you're working with buyers is having a conversation about multiple offers and what that could all entail, right? It means being super aggressive as far as your comfort level, be as aggressive as you can go, right? Ahead of time. But what I like about having a conversation and preparing your buyer before they're right there in the house and having to make a quick decision because we're on a tight timeline for deadline of offers and that stress is just building up. Having the conversation early, right, allows them to just really be able to process it. What does that mean? What am I able to do as a buyer in regards to being aggressive with my offers? They have the time to kind of sort through that first, right? Like I said, versus being under the gun of, oh my gosh, I love this house and there's 20 other offers, right? So prep your buyer ahead of time, see their ability, their comfort level on how aggressive they're willing to go, okay? So let's dig a little deeper on Bob's topic of inspections, right? That's a big one. How many of us have had that conversation with buyers that you're going to be up against offers where they're going to pull, or not do an inspection, right? So are you comfortable with that? Is there an option, like Bob said, to maybe get an inspection in during or an inspector come through with you during your showing, right? To just pay them to do a quick walkthrough, maybe not a full inspection, but, take a look at some of the key things to see if you're comfortable going in without an inspection, right? And a lot of times these sellers hopefully have done a pre-inspection, which would be huge as well. So you've really got to feel out your buyer's comfort level. I never recommend a buyer doing anything they are not comfortable doing. But our job is to also make them aware of the situation, right? Is that there could be buyers out there making offers that they don't have an inspection contingency attached, right? But that's definitely one way to make an offer stronger, right? Is no inspection contingency or minimal, right? We're going to go in there and we're only going to go and ask for large ticket items over a certain price point. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I do an inspection, I'm not going to nickel and dime you, right? I only want to look for items over $5,000 or whatever. So that's another way that maybe your buyer feels comfortable, but also the seller will feel comfortable. Okay. Anybody else have any tidbits when it comes to inspection? Anything they're doing differently out there with the inspection contingency?
Maybe not doing anything different. And this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but when when you're dealing with buyers and kind of unlike Bob, but when you're dealing with somebody new that you don't know, you don't really have a good feel for their tolerance level. And they might go in and they might request inspections and not that you're going to talk them out of it, but they may have to lose a handful of offers before their mindset starts changing and they either have to buy, they're forced to buy, their timing dictates that. And then they just say, you know what, we have to get more aggressive, and they figure it out, right? And they're able to come in without an inspection contingency, or like Bob said, you're lucky enough to find that right house that you as the agent are able to walk through and just say, you know what, this is a lot better than what we've seen. Maybe we could get by without this.
Yeah. But I think that's where when you said you're dealing with a buyer that you don't really know their tolerance, I think if you guys are going out to show houses and you haven't sat down to talk to your buyer and get a good feel of what they're looking for, are they prepared for a multiple offer, and having those conversations ahead of time, I think you're doing yourself and your client a disservice. So definitely, schedule that kind of consultation before you're out looking at houses. But what are we doing with earnest money? What can we do to make our offer stronger as it applies to earnest money?
Make it non-refundable.
Okay.
After inspection though.
Okay.
Well,
I've
if
seen
there's an
both.
inspection.
If there's, so that's a lot of things. I don't think I would ever recommend not having an inspection, but in Arizona, hi Christine,
Huh?
on there. We do a lot of verbiage of we'll have an inspection, but not ask for repairs. So at least it gives the buyer an out if something is a big item, big ticket item. But even with that being said, I've still gone back and said to the listing agent, look, they're going to walk, or maybe we can work something out because there is just this one item that is freaking them out. So
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I've seen a couple deals with non-refundable earnest money. I've seen, first of all, I would encourage you guys, larger earnest money also makes an offer stronger, right? More skin in the game for your buyer, tells the seller they're serious. But I have seen both where they come in immediately with it's non-refundable, or after inspection, or, after a certain inspection, X amount becomes non-refundable, especially if you're going in large. Let's say you're going in at like $10,000 or $15,000. We even saw $100,000, you guys, $100,000 non-refundable if they didn't close. That to me tells me that you got a very serious buyer, right? So, bottom line is, could they make a portion of that become non-refundable after a certain point? You bet. Right? Maybe you're going in at 10,000 and 5,000 becomes non-refundable after inspection or whatever. So many ways to think about earnest money. This again is your buyer's skin in the game. So, it's telling the seller, if I'm willing to give you that money, regardless of what happens, I'm pretty serious about moving forward, right? So that's definitely a way to make your offer stronger. Let's talk about, this is the most common one, right? Let's talk about offer price. What are you guys seeing out there as far as, here's the list price, where's your buyer going in, for an offer?
Well, I can just tell you based on the experience of one I wrote over the weekend. So the price was listed at $235, which was underpriced by the listing agent. Listing agent wasn't real familiar with the market. So when I was in the house with my buyer, I told them, we're going to probably have one shot and one shot only at this. In my mind, this is a $250,000 house all day long based upon what I know about the market. And that's where you basically tell them, where you talk about the inspection, you talk about the earnest money, you talk about the offer price, is you may only have one chance to do your offer. Make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So make sure you're sharing that with me as your agent, so you don't have any regrets after the fact. Because I've been down that path before where I've had the buyer say, shoot, I would have paid $275 for that. Well, you had the one chance to do it and you lost it, and now it's sticking with you. So put your best foot forward that is reasonable for your situation. So the house actually ended up having 24 offers on it.
Wow.
Cash buyer, sold for $275.
Wow.
So in that particular chance, my buyers really didn't have a chance anyways. So Bruce's point earlier, they have to lose a couple as well. I guarantee you the next house they run into, they're probably going to be even more aggressive, and there was no inspection on it. So
yeah. Sometimes you just can't compete. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Perhaps that agent, that was a marketing strategy. Maybe she priced the house low to drive all of that interest in the property as well. So that probably was a marketing strategy, would be my guess. But it's possible they didn't know what they were doing either.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to this because I have a note to really talk about maybe prepping sellers, right? And talking to sellers about how do we garner better offers and possible multiple offer situations too. So that is definitely a strategy that some people use, right? So are you guys seeing, let's just take the cash investor guys off the table, right? That can come in and boom, like Bob's situation, right? Are we talking, have you guys dealt with buyers going in over asking price? Okay. And let's talk about appraisal gap guarantees. Are you seeing that, or are your buyers doing that?
Definitely.
Yep.
Okay. So I've seen that too. And I'll tell you, there's a couple ways to do it. So you could go in, and we'll use Bob's example. It's listed at $235. Let's say your buyer wants to go in and they're willing to go, 15 or 20 over, right? So let's just use 20 for easy math. So they're willing to go in at $255. To me, that number is just a number on paper to the seller, unless you're willing to guarantee a part of that, right? If you're saying I'm going $255, but I'm not guaranteeing any difference, well, that's just a number right now, right? Because if that house doesn't appraise, then that seller's not getting that money anyway, right? So obviously being able to guarantee all or a portion of it definitely makes your offer stronger. Now, that's not always an ability for a buyer, right? They don't always have that cash sitting in a bank account to be able to make up the difference if that property doesn't appraise, right? So again, these are all conversations with your buyer. Hey, it's listed at 235, you're offering 255, you want to guarantee the difference, you've got to have that cash worst case scenario if that property doesn't appraise to bring to the table, okay? Because most of us know, and if you don't, the lender will only lend on the purchase price or the appraised value, whichever is lower. So, you know, it doesn't matter how you could write it for $1 million over list price. If the property doesn't appraise, the seller's not making that money, right? So they want to know they're making that money. So I've seen both, all or none. You know, we've done X amount of dollars over the list price, right? We'll guarantee X amount of dollars over the list price. Do any of you guarantee if it doesn't even appraise that list price? Do your buyers do that?
What do you mean, Kelly?
So let's say in Bob's situation, it's at 235 and you come in and offer 250, right? And you're thinking, I'm gonna cover the difference between the list price and this. But let's say it appraises and it appraises at 225, not 235. So now, you know, here your buyer was thinking, I'm prepared for the, you know, the above list price, but I wasn't prepared for an additional 10 below list price, right? So make sure you're having conversations with your buyer that, you know, are you prepared to cover what you've offered over list price? Or are you prepared to cover everything between appraisal and your offer price? Because it could be even more than that, right? If the property doesn't even appraise at list price. Does that make sense, you guys?
We actually have a form now because so many people start, I don't know if you guys do in Minnesota, but it's called additional clause addendum, where we put the amount in. So if it does appraise less, it's still just like the 15,000.
Yep.
Per se, if that's the case, then it would just be the 15,000.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
we do not have a form, but this is a great conversation because here in states where you don't have a form like that, if you're writing an offer, this is verbiage that probably should be included based on your buyer's comfort level, right? Like when I write mine, I always write, you know, X amount of dollar, we're willing to guarantee X amount of dollars between the list price, you know, or above the list price and appraised value, right? So we're not going to go below list price. If your house doesn't even appraise where you listed it, we're not covering that, but we're going to cover, you know, X amount over list price. Okay. Or use the verbiage from Pam's thing. And maybe Pam, you could share that form and we could maybe copy some of that verbiage onto our purchase agreements where, you know, if you were willing to pay $20,000 over list price, but it doesn't appraise at list price, you're only going to pay $20,000 over appraised value.
I think they did it because for the sake of lawsuits, we were all during COVID writing all this verbiage in and it was all over the place. And they just thought, okay, we need to add this onto this additional clause. It's also like the one where there's a backup offer or there's, you know, no
Yep.
appraisal and that kind of thing. I'll share it with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, we're not attorneys, so we don't want to try to be, but you know, sometimes we have to be on the fly, like, right, we're putting in verbiage and clauses into these offers. Well, we got to make sure that we're really protecting our clients. So yeah, if you can share that, what we'll do is we'll post it on the Empire Mastermind as well under the media files for everybody. So, okay, so ways we can be certainly very competitive with asking price and appraisal gaps, or I mean, offer price and appraisal gap guarantee. What about other contingencies, you guys? Are we telling our buyers to really limit their contingencies? Like Bob said, put your best foot forward, keep it clean, right? What are the conversations you're having with your buyers about those other things? Like, I should maybe not even say contingencies, home warranties, you know, things like that. What's your conversation with your buyer about the rest of the offer?
Yeah, I don't know if this applies outside here in Minnesota, especially rural Minnesota and Wisconsin. We have a lot of well and septics. So one of the things that I'll recommend to the buyer is paying for the well and septic tests. And, if those haven't already taken place. So the advantage to the seller is that if for some reason the buyer does not move forward with the deal, and in the writing, we would supply the test to the seller. So they would have them for future buyers. So it's kind of a benefit from that perspective. And we also are in an area here where there's a fair amount of non-compliant septic systems. So, my conversations are a little bit different when you're looking at a house with septic systems, knowing that could be a $30,000, $40,000 fix if it's not, good. So that's one of the things in our marketplace that would be an advantage to the sellers if they're looking at multiples, if they have a well and septic.
Nice. Yeah. What about if they have a property to sell? How are you guys handling that conversation with knowing they're going into multiple offers, or, hey, before we even get to that position, we're sitting down and having the consultation and you're telling me you've got to sell a property. What conversations are you having with your buyers in regards to that?
Asking them if they, can come up, get their house sold before we put an offer in, and see if they can live with family or make some other accommodations for however long it's going to take to, find the house. And the more aggressive that they can be in their offers moving forward, the greater the likelihood that we'll be able to expedite this process. But, if you're not going to be aggressive and have all these asks, then, you may be in your temporary living situation for much longer. So it's definitely risky for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly their tolerance, right? I mean, some people don't want to have to move twice. Some people don't have the ability to maybe bridge the gap with a bridge loan on their equity in their current home to be able to purchase, without having to sell, right? Those are conversations that you should be having, right? What's your financial ability? Are you able to purchase without selling? What are they selling, right? Is it a home that will sell quickly or not? Are they financially able to do that and credit able to do that? It's really comes down to their comfort zone, right? And just having, again, those conversations like, okay, that's a strike, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people have a house to sell, but if you're up against multiple offers, you're probably the first one that's getting their offer pulled out if you have to have your home sold before you can perform on this contract, right? So what are our options? And just having those conversations. Okay. What about, go ahead.
I was just talking to a lender this week about that knock, how they purchase, or so you don't have to do a buyer contingency. And after, I don't want to misquote it because we were going to sit down and talk about it, but we need our lender guy on here. So you don't have to do a buyer contingency. And then after, if their house doesn't sell within so many days, knock buys it, obviously at a discounted rate, but it gives them that ability to not do a buyer contingency on an offer.
Sure. Yeah, I think, we've got express offers with EXP. I wonder if they would, do that as well. I mean, you're going to take a hit on it, but if it, gets you out of that situation, it might be something that they're willing to consider too.
So Kel, we did we had the guy from Unbankable on here last week. Is that something where they might get involved and buy the house from the seller? Even if the buyer had a house to sell, would they buy the house from the seller and then do the contract for deed with the buyer and then let them sell their house and then settle the contract for deed?
Yeah,
I think you're getting two different things mixed up. I think we're just talking about if we got to unload a house before we can offer, we don't have a buyer yet, right?
No, I know, but if you're in multiple offers, you don't have a whole lot of time.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, there are definitely investors.
Bruce, to your point, I'm sorry to interrupt, Kelly. To your point, there's we actually just accepted an offer on one of our listings with somebody who had a house to sell, and our listing price was like $940. So it was a higher end listing. And their house is probably worth $750 on the other side of town. So they actually had a lender because they had so much equity in there, but they but not quite enough. They didn't want to with the interest rates being as high as they were, they didn't want to do a bridge finance.
Mhm.
So they had a hard money person come in and offer them the opportunity to buy their house so they could.
Yep. Oh, I got Bob's frozen up a little bit.
Mhm. Lost you, Bob.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, so
I
there
was
are
just gonna mention that actually. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask him about that because I remember seeing that. I think it was called like NEF Cash or something like that. Was the
Okay.
company that did it. So
And honestly, you guys, in your area, I don't care where you're working out of, there are people and investors that will do that. So, if you're looking to kind of build your arsenal of tools for your buyers, that is definitely a connection. I would say start developing those relationships so that when you do come across hey, I've got to have a quick buyout on something, you've got that opportunity, to present that option. So that's a great idea. What about home warranty or seller paid closing costs? Are we having conversations as well? Like that's probably not going to fly. Asking for those things if we're in a multiple offer. Yeah. Yeah, I think, if you've got offers where nobody's asking for sellers to help out and pay their closing costs, certainly you've got to have that conversation with your buyer as well. How bad do you really need it? Can we offer a little bit more? And then have them cover it, I guess, if you absolutely need cash out of pocket, right? But if you don't, definitely try to make your offer as clean as possible. Again, you're up against multiple offers. That seller is going to look for the fastest way to get to the closing table with the fewest amount of hurdles from their buyer, right? So let's keep it clean. Let's talk about closing date. Do you guys call do you call the listing agent and ask what the preferred closing date is of the seller? Yep. That's another way, right? To make your offer strong and appealing to the seller is to find out what works for them for closing and be flexible on your end as a buyer to meet that closing date, right? Another caveat to that is if your seller doesn't have, or if that seller doesn't have a house yet to move out to, could you be flexible as a buyer and do a rent back for the seller till they find something?
Mhm.
If you're flexible on the buy side, that's a great benefit. Hey, I'm willing to do a rent back. You can stay in that house till you find something, or, at least set a date out. And don't feel like you have to be stressed in finding a property to buy, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when there's very low inventory out there. I'm very flexible on my end. I can let you stay in the house till you find something, right? That'd be a huge selling point for the seller, right? So knowing a little bit more about the seller situation is always good. And I would recommend to every one of you guys to reach out to that seller, start building that relationship, even though you have a small window of time in a multiple offer situation, build a little bit of a relationship with that seller or with that seller's agent, right? Tell me a little bit more. What's their timeline? Are they moving right away? Do they have a house? What's their preferred closing date? How can we work with your seller to make our offer the most appealing? They'll share everything they can or that they've been authorized to share. So why not get that information? I don't think every other agent is doing that. So,
a call to the listing agent, I think, is huge. I mean, how often as listing agents do we just get offers and you haven't heard a peep from that agent and you remember the ones that you talk to or that ask questions, and I think it's a small thing that can go very far.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Well, absolutely. And, we're dealing with people's livelihoods, and it's amazing to
Right.
me how many agents do not pick up the phone. It's such a simple
Mhm.
thing. And,
Right.
I'm a piece of paper with all these numbers and terms can look really great, right? But you can then pick up the phone and have a conversation with that person and be like, ooh, like I'm not feeling this, so there's so much to be gained by just having conversations. And it's such a simple thing. And it truly blows my mind that more agents do not pick up the phone.
Exactly.
Agree.
And, keep this in mind, you guys, as you're doing your business in general, right? Be that good agent. Be the one that's respectful, even when things go bad in situations. Take the higher ground. Don't be rude and condescending and mean and whatever. Nobody wants for a bad situation to happen. So, take the high road and help figure solutions out. Because in the end, you might be one of those agents that's representing your buyer in a multiple offer situation. And that selling agent is going to say, man, I can tell you right now, Kelly is a fantastic agent. And if we pick her offer, we are going to be working with a professional, and I know we're going to get to the closing table, right? Good relationships go a long, long way. And I can tell you right now, just this year, I got my offer submitted for my buyer because they said, out of all the agents, I told my seller, we want to work with this one. Holy moly, great. Thank God, right? You think it had nothing to do with the terms of the offer, but because you do good business and you're a professional, people want to work with you, right? So never underestimate the power of your professionalism. So yes, call the agent, talk to the agent, find out what you can, build that rapport or that relationship as fast as you can in that multiple offer situation. What about, have any of you done offering to pay the seller's costs versus maybe like guaranteeing that appraisal gap, right? Because maybe they don't have that cash at hand, but offering to pay some of the costs for the seller can be very appealing, right? The seller's got a big chunk with commissions. They have a big chunk of costs that they pay at the end. That might be some creative way to set your offer apart, right? Or stand out to the seller. What about personal letters? Are any of you guys having your buyers do personal letters? No? Christina, why? Why are you not doing that?
We used to do that where it's a big no. So we could be fined. So it's just a big no. So I again just pick up the phone and I try to be very clever with the way that I present the story, to the agent. But you just don't want to have any of that here in Arizona anyways, documented. I've done it and it's worked really, really well. But we just cannot do that anymore.
Okay. Yeah. So now it's something where it's maybe official, where you can get fined if you do it in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We were told not to do it just because just the chances of violating
Fair housing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we have gone to anything official here in Minnesota that I'm aware of, but when we go to our CE classes and all of that, they're very upfront about just being very careful with doing those letters. If you still feel you need to, certainly don't include any pictures. Make sure you're instructing your buyers to not flag out anything in regards to something that might be in violation of fair housing. It's probably a good rule not to do it, but I will tell you, there have been offers that have been selected because of that, right? Someone connected with something that they said. I will say, Bob brought up, the investor person coming in cash and paying over whatever, 40,000 over list price. Sometimes sellers don't want to sell to an investor, right?
Mm-hmm.
They feel like, boy, these investors are coming in and buying up everything in our community, and I want a family to have my house, right? So there's a hard and fast decision you have to make representing your client as to, do you include that love letter or not, right?
Yes, I have had a story, I've had actually several situations where, we haven't been the highest offer, but it's been the story that has sold. And also me picking up the phone and the agent just being like, oh my gosh, Christine, like, we really want to work with you. You guys were not the highest offer, but we just have a really good feeling. And one of my clients went to the open house. I was actually with other clients, so I couldn't attend the open house, but my client went in there and won the heart of the listing agent, and
Yeah.
so, that's, at least that's not me getting into trouble, because I'm not divulging all this information about my client.
Yep.
So sometimes that can work as well.
Yep. Obviously, that's a great way to do it. I love it. Anybody else have any stories about like the love letter or the how they got the offer without maybe officially doing the love letter? No. Okay. So just note, yes, it is a way to separate your offer from the rest if it's allowable in your area. But just be very careful. Again, I would advise you not to include pictures or, get too all right. I'm looking at my notes here. What else? Here's the other thing. Most of us, hopefully every one of us on this call aren't even getting out and showing our buyers homes without having them pre-approved. But what about strengthening that? Have you guys done anything where you've gotten your buyer through full underwriting? Yep.
Definitely.
So, in case you don't know, right, there's a difference between pre-qualified, pre-approved, and fully underwritten, right? So pre-qual, they basically just had somebody look at their income and their debts, just verbally, right? Here's how much I make, here's how much you have in your debt structure, here's roughly what you would qualify for. Pre-approval, they've pulled credit, they've maybe even gone a little bit further and filled out some kind of an application, right? And run some actual numbers, a little bit more in depth. But full underwriting is an underwriter has verified employment, verified all the debts, right? They've gone through the verification process, and the underwriter is saying this buyer has been verified and they are fully underwritten. Now it just comes down to the property, going through the checks and balances of the approval process. So that can definitely strengthen your offer with the seller knowing that everything has been verified with that buyer. Okay. So that's definitely a way to make your offer stronger. Anybody else using any other strategies that we haven't? Oh, this is a big one. I got a good one. Escalation clause. Do you guys use escalation clauses at all? Yes, no? Everybody, you're on mute. So you can take yourself off mute.
I have used it, but I tend to not use it a lot just because it can be, we also have some agents, just listing agents say, no, don't do it. Just give me your best offer, because it does get a little confusing for them when they have a whole bunch of offers to look at.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, I would say if you guys are going to use it or you want to use it, verify with the seller's agent that they are allowing those or they're willing to consider those first, right? You don't want to waste your time and go through all of this and you submit your offer and then they're not even willing to consider it, right? So for those of you, if you don't know what an escalation clause is, you're basically saying my buyer is willing to pay X amount above the highest offer that you receive up to a certain amount, right? So if you're going to use an escalation clause, what's the differential above the highest offer and what's the cap that your buyer is willing to go up to for a purchase price? You want to protect your buyer. Now, if your buyer says, I don't have a cap, let's just roll with it, right? Well, then, okay. But if they do have a limit, you need to make sure you include that. Okay. We just won one. We were in, my buyer had lost two others beforehand. So again, we talked about, they get a lot braver and a lot, more riskier with their offers after they lose a few. But we had one go in. She was going to go $1,000 over the highest bid, and it was up to 20 grand above the list price. So thankfully she won the offer and didn't have to use her escalation clause, which was great because she already went in 10,000 over list price with her base offer and then said, I'm now willing to go 1,000 over, anything above this, but she didn't have to exercise it. So that was nice, but they definitely can get your buyer the win. Again, we just want to make sure that the sellers are willing to consider those and then make sure that you're talking with your buyer about if there's a cap, to how high they want to go. Okay. Any questions on an escalation clause in general? Okay, good. You guys are quiet this morning. What about making a larger down payment? You're looking at, you're helping a seller decipher 10 offers and you've got 9 of them are a 5% down buyer or minimum down buyers, and you're that 20% down buyer, or your buyer's that 50% down buyer. That probably looks a lot better, right? Than that minimum down, that person that can't qualify or barely qualifies for a minimum down loan, right? So, can your buyer put down more money? Can they be a 20% or a 50% or 40% buyer? I would definitely say that makes your buyer look a lot stronger in the eyes of the seller.
I did
Okay.
have a situation with a buyer that they were able to be non-contingent, but they could only do 5% down then.
Yep.
So of course, in that case, just making sure the agent's aware this is why we're at 5%, and they're actually very strong financially.
Yep.
But so sometimes there's those little caveats, but yes, for sure, a higher down payment is always a strong point.
That exact thing just happened to us, Asha. We had the listing and we were a
Right.
multiple offer, and the person came in and said, we were hoping to have our house sold, right, and make a contingent offer, but we didn't, and here's why. Otherwise, and if you take our offer, we're going to get our house on the market real fast.
Right.
But we'll be putting down more if it sells. So yeah, just again,
Yeah.
it goes back to that conversation, right? Calling that agent and really explaining yourself versus sending it over in an email
Yes.
and hoping that, they understand what's behind that offer, right?
If you're working with a great lender, a lot of times they'll call too and kind of reinforce that, which is never hurts.
I think that's another great strategy, right? We haven't even talked about that. Have your lender reach out to the seller and say, hey, just want to let you know, Kelly's buyer, I'm working with her and she is rock solid, and you will have no problems getting this to the finish line, right? And if you have any
And
questions,
you might be
feel
able
free
to
look out.
verify if you've got an appraisal gap, that you've got the funds, or, just those other things too, that sometimes, like for my seller, I want to make sure, okay, they say they can pay this, but can
Right.
they? So,
Yeah. So that's another good point, Asha, is that if you guys are representing a cash buyer, just because you're coming in cash, okay, looks good. Don't forget to get that proof of funds letter. Have that submitted, just like you'd be doing a pre-approval letter with your buyer who's getting financing. Have that proof of funds letter available to submit with that cash offer, right? Now there's no question. That seller already knows you've got the cash. Okay. So I think we've kind of hit on some really great strategies for these multiple offers. Get creative, think outside the box, talk to your buyer about what their tolerance is, ahead of time before you're in the middle of that multiple offer situation and there's already stress. But on the flip side, let's just take a few minutes and talk about if you're representing a seller, okay? That price point is probably going to be a price point that's going to garner multiple offers, right? So as much as we prepare our buyers for that during the consultation, have that conversation with your sellers when you're doing your listing consultation, right? How can you best prepare your seller for multiple offers? What are you guys doing on that end? Anyone? Okay, well, I'll tell you what I do. I will first of all tell them what I just said, right? You have a price point. We're more than likely going to have a multiple offer, assuming we price it correctly, right? So to Christine's comment earlier, that could be a really good strategy, right? Like here's kind of my 3-point price range. You could be here on the higher end or you could be on the lower end. We may want to go on the lower end when we hit the market, because that's going to bring even more buyers to the table, which could then, push your offer prices up, right? That's a great strategy, especially in a low inventory market. So preparing them on what are best practices and what are some strategies to use to get those multiple offers and get those higher offers is definitely a conversation you should be having with a seller. Always talk to your sellers about having their home pre-inspected. I am such a fan of this. I know it's a cost to the seller versus being a cost to the buyer. But number one, being transparent upfront, giving you an opportunity, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to fix anything that might be wrong. And then being able to show that inspection report ahead of time to all these buyers is probably going to give us the best opportunity to get the cleanest offers when we're looking at this, right? If we've already done an inspection, we're going to have more buyers coming in without inspection contingencies. And that's what we want for our sellers, right? Clean offers to get us to the closing table in time. So I always recommend, let's have a pre-inspection done. Throw that out there available to all buyers looking at your house, full transparency, and helps you bulletproof your transaction a little bit as well. Any questions on that? And are you guys doing that? Are you recommending pre-inspections for your sellers? Yep. Okay. And that goes for radon too, you guys. There's going to be sometimes people do a home inspection, pre-inspection before they list their house, but they don't do a radon test. Well, now you might have buyers coming in and still wanting to do an inspection contingency to do a radon test, right? So, again, it's up to the seller what they want to do, but I always recommend having all that done ahead of time just so that you have that full transparency. Are you guys helping them with staging if they need it before they put it on the market? Good. If you are not well versed in that yourself, partner up, find a local stager that, might be willing to do a 1-hour consultation as part of your listing package that you pay for, right? 1 hour is not that big, maybe $100, right? I don't know what they charge in your area, but include it as part of your listing consultation. Then I'm going to bring my stager in here. They're going to give you a 1-hour consultation, do a quick walkthrough and give you some tips on how to make your house present its best self to the market before we have our professional photographer come in. Okay. So partner with a stager if you don't have one, potentially offer it through your consultation, but definitely help your sellers get their house ready so that when they do put it on the market, it looks great and so many buyers love it and they want to come on in and offer them, make an offer. If you do not do professional photography right now at this stage of real estate, get out. I'm just going to tell you that. I mean, there's no room for iPhone. And I get that our phones are so great now with cameras, but you really need to be enlisting professional photography. I mean, unless it's just a tear down, I get that. It's just too hard to compete without doing professional photos. Okay. But definitely do that. Prepare them for multiples. And then talk about, this is the other thing, I think in prepping your seller, talk to them about what if we are in a multiple offer situation, you guys? Do we want to set a deadline? Do we want to wait and see how many offers are coming in and then set a deadline? Talk to them about what their options are. Sometimes putting a house on the market right away and saying, oh, it's Friday, we're going live on the market and our deadline for any and all offers is noon on Sunday, might be a little premature, because what if you don't get any offers and Sunday comes around and now you got this deadline and you look stupid, right? So I would just have the conversation of, let's put it on the market. Let's see what activity we're getting. Let's see if we get word of offers. If we know we're getting more than one, then we can maybe determine what a deadline would be for an offer, right?
Hey, Kelly.
Yes.
It's Bob. Sorry, I'm having internet issues at my office. I'm on my phone, but I really like what you're saying here. But here's what I would caution people on and talk is when you're sitting with your seller and you're in a really good market, you still have really no way of predicting if you're going to get multiple offers on that house. And I'm going to tell you, we got bit by this a couple times because we thought for sure we would be getting multiple offers. And then we're 2 weeks into the listing and it's still on the market. So one thing we learned from that is under no circumstances, make them think that they're going to get multiple offers, because that will stick with them. And, you always will hear the seller saying, oh yeah, I'd love to have a bidding war on my house. Well, we don't always know what's going to happen.
Right.
So when we talk about multiple offers at the listing, we can say, in the event that we maybe get a multiple offer situation, we can talk about how we would handle that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we'll handle that when the time comes, if it comes. So just because, like I said, I've been through a couple situations where we thought for sure we were getting multiple offers, and for whatever reason, there was a pause in the market, or there was an intricacy with that particular listing that buyers were not moving forward on. And then, we had to kind of rebuild that relationship with the sellers, because they thought, well, how come my neighbor got multiple offers and we hired you guys and we didn't get that? Why is that? So I would just caution people to be careful about how much they're talking about that at the listing presentation.
Yep.
Yep. That's
exactly.
just my 2 cents and my learning experience.
Great idea. Yeah. I piggyback on that and say, I think you need to talk about it, but you need to be very transparent in the fact that I'm not guaranteeing that you're going to have them, but like you said, in the event, you know, here are some things we need to think about. Awesome. Thank you. Great point. Any other questions or strategies you guys are using out there that you can share with the group for multiples that we haven't addressed? Okay, awesome. Well, we are,
Angela, in the chat just supplied me a multiple offer checklist. I'm gonna throw it in the, chat as a file. So you guys can grab it. We'll also post it on the, Empire Facebook page as well.
okay, awesome. Well, good. Well, certainly, you know, tis the season. Like we said, we're getting busy again, you guys, and I don't doubt that you'll all have the opportunity to be battling it out there on the battlefield here with multiple offers. So, hopefully some of these strategies will help a little bit. If you have questions or you want to run anything by any of us, feel free to reach out. Hopefully you have our contact information. If you haven't joined Empire Masterminds Facebook group, please do so, because we record these, we post these in on the Facebook page, so that if you can't make them live and you find a topic that you want to go back and watch the recording, then that'll be a benefit to you. And then, like we talked about, we'll have these other ancillary you know, tools and things that we'll post there as well. Otherwise, everybody have a fantastic week. Go get some business, and hopefully we'll see you then next week. Great to see
Awesome.
you. Thanks again.
Awesome to see everybody. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.